Hello everyone, my name's Rhonda R. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is May 15th, 2008, and I wished I could say that was my original sobriety date, but it is not. I'm a nervous wreck. I'd rather do anything but stand here, but then again, this is one of the easiest things to do. You just tell how you messed your life up and how God cleaned it up and turned your mess into a message. Also, the joke in the room tonight is this is round 2. I was here December 23rd, got about 15-20 minutes into my story, and Matt had overindulged in sugar treats that night and fell out. So we had to stop the meeting. So I seen him grab a cookie. I said, "Don't you do that tonight." And then, of course, everybody tells me I'll do fine. And I told my sponsor, I said, "That's easy when you're not the one coming up here." But anyway, my home group is the Came to Believe group of Rocky Mount. We meet each Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 8. All of our meetings are closed meetings with the exception of the last Friday. We are a 3 Legacy Big Book study group. First 3 Tuesdays of the month, we study the Big Book cover to cover. It takes us a little over 2 years. The 4th Tuesday, we study the tradition that corresponds with the month out of the 12 and 12. And when there's a 5th Tuesday, we study AA history. Friday nights are closed discussion meetings with the topic being picked out of AA conference-approved literature by the chairperson. And then the last Friday of the month is our only open meeting, and it's open speaker meeting, and we celebrate home group membership. So what my job here tonight is to tell you what I was like, what happened, what I'm like today, and how I developed a relationship with my higher power, who I choose to call God. I am North Carolina bred and raised. I didn't spend but a few years outside of North Carolina. I was born right down the road in Goldsboro. My dad was a serviceman. I had a younger brother. At the age of 3, my mom walked off. They had moved back to Winston, and my dad come home from work one day, and she had left him a note. "I've taken Rhonda, here's Steve with the babysitter," and good riddance is pretty much how that went. And so my dad worked 3rd shift all of his life, from 11 to 7 or 11 to 8. And so my grandparents took custody of me and my baby brother. They were Southern Baptist. I was in church every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. My dad remarried when I was 8, and I was thrilled because by this time I had done started school, and people were picking on me because my grandmother was in her 50s. Now, I think that's hilarious now because I'm 62 and I don't think I look old. But my grandma looked old back then, And so I got teased a lot, that I didn't have a mama. My dad was there physically, but working 3rd shift. He slept during the day, so he really wasn't, there to be supportive or help raise us. So when he remarried, I was thrilled to death that I was going to get a mama, and I was going to gain 2 sisters. Me and his second wife did not get along. I was always a daddy's girl, and that kind of impeded on her space a little bit. So there was a lot of riff. I stayed in trouble. I don't know if it was abandonment issues or us not getting along, but I started lying. Those of you that are in your 40s and 50s, you remember the old switch. You can't do that nowadays to your kids. Well, I became a prolific liar due to the switch. You go to school and you have all them marks on your legs, and the people are asking, "What happened to you?" Well, you don't want to tell them that as a teenager you're still getting whippings. So you make up a story. You know, I ran through a briar patch. I was riding motorcycles and, you know, anything. At the age of 16, out of the blue, my mother, who had been, that had been vacant out of the picture for 13 years, called and she said, Rhonda, this is your mother. Would you like to come out to Colorado and spend the summer with me? Well, because me and stepmom didn't get along, I jumped on that. I don't even know who this lady is, you know, but she says she's my mom. So I get on a plane, I fly out to Colorado. Back up a second, at 13, that switch goes off. I'm drinking, I'm smoking cigarettes, and I have discovered boys. And, you know, that's just a polite way to put it. And probably all in the same night, if you want to be honest with it. Cigarettes were not my only device. I do have a lot of other issues in my story, but out of respect for AA, I really try to focus on the alcohol part. So anyway, I arrived in Colorado at the age of 16, thinking I'm grown. And my mother apparently thinks she's picking up that 3-year-old that she walked off from, you know, lost during that, or those floaters. I got the darn floaters now. Anyway, so she had no earthly idea what she was getting, and I don't think she got what she was getting. You know, first thing I was after was, what are the rules? And she said, there are no rules. Oh boy, no rules, and I'm drinking. And so now I'm on the hunt for a boy, a man, whatever you call it, and I find one. And he is doing illegal activity, which is right up my alley. And that just caused more problems, which I blamed on her, of course. And so I got married at the age of 17. She tried to talk me out of it. I should have listened, but she didn't. I got married at the age of 17. Had my first son 10 months later. I had just turned 18 when I had my first son. And I decided it was this, I got husband to agree that it was best we come back to Winston-Salem. So we drove all the way from Colorado in a U-Haul truck with a toddler sitting in the front seat with us, and we came back to Winston. At the age of 20, I had my second son, and at the age of 22, I have decided, since I'm legal for the hard booze, I was legal at 18 for the beer and stuff, that I didn't want to be married no more, and I really didn't want to be raising kids no more. And, you know, the wild side of life just looked better, and there were issues in the marriage. They got kind of volatile at times, and I just walked off one day. I did the same thing my mother did. He came home from work one day, and the kids were with the babysitter. Now, I found all that out doing 4-step work, and you know, that wasn't the thinking for a long time, but I repeated my mother's behavior, the woman I held a resentment against for so many years. And anyway, so for the next 20 or 30 years, just to keep this short and not get into a drunk-a-log, my drinking escalated. I did get into other issues, which got me into criminal behavior. I was in and out of the county jails all the time, a revolving door. And in 1987, I had found another victim to hook up with, and I had son number 3 at the age of 26. And when I went to jail, my mom come and took him from me. She convinced his dad that he'd be better off with her. And truth be known now, he was much better off with her. But at the time, all I could see was you walked off from me, but you're going to take my son. You know, that's just, and so that just brewed and built on that resentment I had. So anyway, I went to prison in 1989. It was a very short stay. Had an 8-month sentence, but back then when you walked through the gates, they were cut in half. If you have never had a physical, I'm talking about a really good physical, that's where you go. You go to Department of Corrections, because they are going to give you a very good physical. They're going to check every hole. If you have a hole, they're going to check it. They're going to do lab work, and they're going to check for every known thing to mankind. And mine popped up that I was more than likely HIV positive. There wasn't enough virus in my body to come positive, but it definitely wasn't negative. Now, they talk about how news travels in a small town. You go to a women's prison camp. There's like 2,500 women there. That just spreads faster than wildfire. Anyway, I got released in October, and I went back home. And the first thing I did when I got off that bus was go to a payphone and call somebody for outside issues. And they had told me in prison, they were like, you need to get your your affairs in order. You got about 5 years to live. Because back in 1989, the AIDS virus had only been out for like 4 or 5 years. It was a death sentence. You were going to die. There was just no doubt about it. So you would think the responsible thing to do would be go back home, go to a doctor, let's jump on this. And my thought was, we're going to go into the grave sideways. We're going to slide right on in there. And so that's what I did for another 25 years, was drink, dibble dabble, catch this victim here, catch a victim there. When I'm done with you, I'll throw you away. Meanwhile, me and husband number one were playing chess using my 2 oldest sons as pawns. And that's hard to admit today. You know, when he got tired of paying child support, he'd want the boys back. And I would have to give them up because my character would not allow me to keep them. And when they would get to be too much for him, he would bring them back to me. And the times I had them, I robbed my oldest son of his childhood. I mean, it's just the easiest way to put it. I was right back into criminal activity. And I'd call him, an 8 and 9-year-old, I would call him from the jail and say, I'm not coming home, you need to call somebody. And he'd be there trying to take care of his younger brother. And it's just really sad. So anyway, I finally got married for the 3rd time in 1998. And he was a self-proclaimed alcoholic. His excuse every time he would slip would be, I'm an alcoholic. That's what alcoholics do. Well, not necessarily. I have learned that relapse is not a part of sobriety, although we do see a lot of it. So I married him. I had arrived. I have somebody that drinks like me, parties like me. At this time, I was a 24-hour-a-day drinker. If my eyes was open, I was drinking. 2 o'clock in the morning was no different than 2 o'clock in the evening. I acquired my first DUI before we actually got married, going to the beach. Actually, I was married to husband number 2, which I just kind of hopped over. But speaking of, all my late husbands are dead. So I told Bill, be glad I won't marry nobody else, because you'd be dead too by now. But anyway, now I lost my point of thought. Oh, husband number 2. I had hooked up with what would be husband number 3, and I told husband number 2 I work for Bojangles. And I said, there's a conference going on at Carolina Beach or Wilmington. I said, I need to go to that conference. And so I take off to go meet what's going to be husband number 3. And that weekend conference, I had to get everybody on board with me. I had to get my boss, who was my best friend, to not answer her phone. The veterinarian can't answer their phone because I'm at the beach at a conference. And that weekend conference turned into a 10-day conference. And husband number 2 just never questioned it, which is why I kind of skipped over him. I mean, you know. And my time frame for relationships was 4 years. If you lasted 4 years, you were doing good, because normally by the end of 4 years, I had done drained you of what I wanted and was walking off. So back to husband number 3. That's how I got first DUI, going to go see him at the beach on husband number 2. And traveling down I-40, and I had a 6-pack in the car with me, and I'm drinking, I'm having a good time, I'm traveling with traffic, and all of a sudden I see a state trooper going westbound, and he turns his lights on, and I look up, and I'm the only car on the road. Everybody else had exited off, and I thought, well, that must be for me. So I just pulled over and waited on him. You know, finished my beer and waited on him, and sure enough, he came around. I was who he was. He pulled me. His lights came on for speeding. But by the time he got to me, and I'd done chugged 2 or 3 beers, that quickly changed from a speeding ticket to a DUI. So that was the first one I got. In 2001, I got the second one. Now, y'all are not going to believe this. I was going to Lake Norman, and I was driving a car, SUV my late husband had just bought. And I'm drinking because, you know, I'm a round-the-clock drinker. And I get off of I-40, go to 77 South. I took that exit just a little too fast. I sideswiped the guardrail for about a quarter of a mile. I get to my destination, and I tell my friend who is dating his brother, and I said, I just sideswiped his car. I said, give me a drink. And I get in the shower, and the next thing I know, somebody's knocking on the door, and it is a state trooper issuing me a DUI for somebody was behind me and seen me swipe that and followed me all the way to my destination. And it called the state trooper. So I officially got my second DUI in the shower and wasn't even behind the wheel of a car. Anyway, the third one I got, somebody T-boned me, and filling out the paperwork in the back of the police car, I couldn't quit talking. You know, and I had been drinking, so the state trooper smelled it on my breath and took me in on top of the other person. That one did get dismissed, though, due to technicality. And, I just did crazy stuff when I was drinking. I took a friend of mine, to Stokes County for a court appearance. And I thought, well, you're going to court. I'm going to drink. So I drank, going up to take her to court, and I'm going to help her out. I'm a good friend. And I start talking to the attorneys and the state troopers, and first break that come along, the judge says, can you take that lady in the hall and give her a breathalyzer? And I blew a .08 right on the line, so I got put in a holding cell till lunchtime. And they would not release me 1 minute before lunchtime. So, you know. But anyway, on March 21st, 2005, Me and my late husband, by late husband, you can see where this is going. We had been drinking all weekend. We had gone through 2 half gallons, and some wine. We had been in a little convenience store on Sunday morning and bought a bunch of wine and was drinking it and went to bed 10, 11 o'clock. And I woke up about 2:30 in the morning, and he wasn't in bed. And first thought in my mind was, he better not be in there making a mess in my kitchen. It wasn't my kitchen. He owned the house, you know. But so I get up and I start looking for him, and I get to the top of the steps, turned on the light, and there he was at the bottom of the steps. I didn't know at the time, but deader than the doorknob. He had gotten up sometime in the course of the night, probably thinking he had heartburn, and started walking down the steps and never got to the bottom of the steps. He made it down to 2 steps from the bottom and just fell over. So I'm calling 911, scared to death. I don't know what to do. I'm calling his family. Nobody answers their phone at 3 o'clock in the morning when you need them to answer the call at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I informed all them, and while I was on the phone with the operator, I just kept asking her, can I drink? Can I drink? Can I drink? And she's like, no, please don't drink. And I'm like, but that's all I wanted to do was to drink, to take this dilemma I had found myself in. Well, if you've never experienced that, you have a whole house full of people. And in my instance, because me and my in-laws didn't get along, I had the crime scene investigators there. So I had Sheriff's Department, EMS, Police Department, Crime Scene Unit, all that mess. And it takes them quite a while to do their work. And so, of course, he was pronounced dead. And I don't know how, well, I do know how. You kind of go on autopilot for 3 or 4 days. You know, I remember very little of picking out everything. But anyway, a few days later, a friend came over and introduced me to something else and told me it'd make me feel better, and it did. And I signed up for the suicide on a payment schedule. I spent the next 2 years or a year and a half just trying to drink myself to death, trying to do other things. A guy I had dated for a brief time, his father passed away, so I decided to pay my respects and go see him. Of course, I'm drinking because that's what I do. I drink and drive. I go see people that don't want to see me. I go to places that aren't expecting me. I just show up, thinking I'm going to make the party better, and it's never better. But anyway, I went to this funeral home, and it was a Hayworth Miller in Winston, and they have like numerous viewing rooms. So I get in a viewing line, and I stand there, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, I don't recognize any of these people. I knew a lot of people that this guy knew. And I finally make it up to the casket, and I said out loud, holy crap, this isn't Mr. Bradley. So I'd been standing in the wrong viewing line the whole time. And I did finally find him. I passed my aunt in the hallway who made excuses for me. Well, she just lost her husband 3 weeks ago. You have to kind of overlook her. That's another thing. I come from a family of enablers. They would do anything. I can't tell you how many times my dad, he didn't bail me out of jail, but he would get an attorney for me. He would hand me money. I don't think my dad knew the extent of my drinking. And this is fitting for us coming up on Father's Day. my dad would want me to come over and spend time with him, and I'd have full intentions of wanting to go and spend time with him. And then the day would come and I'd be drinking. And I would just call him and say, no, can't come, I don't feel good, the car's broke, which it wasn't, but anything, because drinking had become more important than spending time with my dad, with my kids, with anything. So from the time my husband passed away to 2006, I fast-tracked to the toilet swirl. You know, going down the bowl. I got my last DUI sitting in a car wash bay. That was July 12th of 2006. Whipped in a car wash bay, was going to wash my car. I did have some not so good character people with me, and I'm digging for change, and I look up, and Winston-Salem police have me blocked in. You know, and they're like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm going to wash my car. And they're like, well, you are in an area of town that's known for suspicious activity. Can we search your car? And I had things in my car I should not have had. That was a normal thing, too. Every time I got pulled, the dogs got called, and the sheriff would say, or deputies would say, Miss Reed, why do you keep driving? And I'm like, because it's too far to walk. You know, we were on a first name basis. And so for a year and a half, from March of 2005 until August of 2006, I was probably in the county jail more than I was out of the county jail. Just a 3-ring circus. I knew all the COs on the women's ward by first hand. I knew a lot of deputies by first hand. And so I went to court, and the judge said, I'm sick and tired of seeing you in here. I'm going to give you 2 8-month sentences back to back. I'm going to boxcar them. But I'm going to suspend that, and you're going to do 90 days in the county jail, and then I'm going to put you on intensive probation for 6 months, and then you're going to be on supervised probation for 5 years. And I said, okay, so I did my little 90 days. I got out and had full intentions of doing right. My sister-in-law had power of attorney, and so she sold the house we shared. She bought another house, not in the most desirable part of town. And what they tell me is you cannot walk past that stop sign 2 blocks down. Now, obviously, they don't know alcoholics and other problem people, because what do I want to do? I want to go right past that stop sign. I want to find out what the forbidden fruit is. Well, the forbidden fruit is the same forbidden fruit I had already tasted. And so it was just on again. It was just on. I had 2 field officers. One came by my house every night. I could set my watch by him. He was there at 8 p.m., hung out for about 5 minutes, and he'd leave. Me and the lady in the office, we had serious issues. She wanted me to produce things I could not produce. And the guy that came by my house, I don't ever think he saw me sober. I think every time he came by, I was intoxicated in some form or another. So anyway, I did that 6 months. Nobody ever revoked my probation. In February of 28th of 2007, I said, I got by with it. Now let me tell you how bad my life had gotten. I had owned a house free and clear from the bank. And I know the bank at dime. I had the deed, but I lived in a house with no lights, no water, no plumbing, of course, and really didn't care. You know, I was dumpster diving in Food Line's dumpster. Food Line, they throw away a lot of good stuff, by the way. Food Line caught wind of me dumpster diving and padlocked the dumpster on me. And so then I just quit eating. You know, I lost like 40 pounds in 2 months. I just shrunk down. So anyway, I thought I'd arrived and gotten by with that. I'm just going to be on intensive or on supervised probation. And my brother came by to visit me. I'm not going to tell my weight tonight. I have in the past, but I ain't telling it tonight. But he said I was a stick figure, that if I turned sideways, you couldn't see me. You know, I weighed 118 pounds at that time. And unbeknownst to me at the time, he went to my probation officer and he said, Rhonda, he's told my probation officer, I don't know if you've seen my sister Rhonda, but if you don't get her off the streets, she's going to be dead in about 5 months. That was on April 15th, 2007. And so me and, once again, Winston-Salem Police Department, we're playing cat and mouse. They're parked out in front of my house. They're trying to nab me, and I'm trying not to be nabbed. And 2 days later, I just gave up. I just walked out the door. And that was on April 17th. And so I was right back into the county jail. I went right back to court, and I got the same judge every time. I'm like, what's those chances? His name was Judge Fine. And so when I went back to court, he said, Miss Reed, that's it. I've given you opportunity. You're going to finish out that sentence. I'm going to reinstate it. You got 13 months left to do. And he put me right back into the county jail. Sometime in about the middle of May, I was transported to Raleigh. And I got onto the Raleigh camp about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm laying there in the reception hall, which I know unless you've been there, you have no clue what I'm talking about. But I got that wonderful physical again, and nothing had changed. But I can remember laying on that bunk at like 2 o'clock in the morning thinking, how on earth did I end up here again 17 years later? Like how? Now you would think anybody with any common sense, 4 DUIs, 3 convicted of, the list of driving while license revoked is a mile long. You would think that somebody would have a clue, but I did not. And so I stayed on the women's camp for about 3 months. They moved me into another dorm where I was sharing a dorm with somebody done something horrific, And I went to bed that night and I just said, Lord, I cannot do this. Now, y'all just imagine being around 2,500 women 24 hours a day. It is not easy, and I'm a woman. It's just not easy. And about 2 o'clock in that morning, the officer on duty, she woke me up. She said, pack your bags, we're shipping you out. I said, where are you shipping me out to? And she said, Rocky Mount. And I said, okay. Now, I'd heard of this place called the Mary Frances Center in Tarboro. I'd heard that they had real beds. Now, I'd heard they had real food. And I thought, that's where I want to go. But they didn't tell me that's where I was going. They told me I was going to Rocky Mount. So I ended up at Fountain Correctional Center. I went in there but about just a couple hours, and these 2 ladies in a van picked me up. Sure enough, I was going to this place called the Mary Frances Center. It's no longer with us, I guess is the best way to put it. But at that time, it was the only treatment facility in the United States that was contracted with the Department of Corrections that would take women that had a drug or alcohol problem, and if they had less than 2 years off on their sentence, they could go there and finish their sentence out. It was a nice place. You know, it's a high school now, or it's a prep school now, but it was a nice place. So I thought, yay, I'm going to have a real bed. You walk in the back door and everybody's like, welcome to the Mary Frances Center, you know, like Oz. Like on the Wizard of Oz when, her house lands. Everybody was just so happy, and I was like, what on earth is going on here? Well, that lady right over there at the time was the CEO. And she is the one that kick-started and loved me when I could not be loved. And I love her to death. And that lady over there got the joy of being my counselor, Sandy. They both seen me at my worst. Well, not quite at my worst, but my worst dry. Let's put it that way. And they were on the DOT system. We were in some kind of counseling or group therapy from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then some of us would get lucky enough to go to outside meetings. And Sunday was the only free day, but we had people such as yourselves that would bring the message in. And they were on a DOT system. So once you got step 1 down, I believe, you got a yellow dot. So you got privileges. You could have visitors. You know, you could do certain things. I could not keep my yellow dot. I don't know how many times Sandy would just walk up and rip my yellow dot off of me. And I'd be like, what's that for? And she'd give me an explanation that I obviously would not agree with. And you know, and when those things would happen, my visits, I couldn't have visits. I couldn't go to the canteen by myself because I couldn't buy cigarettes if your dot's not on you. And so Sandy would have to go with me to the canteen to make sure I didn't buy things that I shouldn't buy. I just couldn't follow the rules there. I did go out the front door, hence my red ruby slippers. Every time I speak, I wear my red ruby slippers because that is one of the things we are gifted when we leave. So right before I left, we had a family powwow. My dad and his girlfriend came up. Miss Snyder was in the room. Sandy was in the room. The head counselor, Teresa, was in the room. And they were all telling me, you'll never make it, Rhonda. You'll never make it. You can't follow the rules. You won't listen. You won't go where we think you should go. I was going to move into Tarboro. That's a community. That's a retirement community. You're going to run out of things to do. You can't watch but so much TV, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, I'll show you, And so I got released on May 10th. I need to hurry up here. I got released on May 10th. My aunt and uncle picked me up from Fountain. They left on the 12th. My dad came up on the 13th and 14th. 14th was my birthday. My dad handed me money for my birthday. And as soon as he left, I started thinking, here you are, it's your birthday, you don't have no family around, you don't have no friends, you just had AA shoved down your throat for 9 months. It's time to celebrate. Let's catch a cab and go to the liquor store. So that's what I did. I called a cab. I went and I bought a half a gallon of vodka. That's what I always drink. And I got it home and I poured me a big old shot. I used to drink two-fisted. Get you those little jelly jars, fill it up with your booze and whatever your chaser was. In the end, my chaser was Cisco. If you don't know what Cisco is, I'll talk to you about that later. But anyway, and I I got one drink down. That drink went down. It came back up so fast it wasn't funny. I spilt my drink everywhere. And then insanity immediately swung in. I was in a one-bedroom apartment. Nobody knew me there except for Sandy and some of the workers there. But my brain was telling me that somebody's going to come knock on my door and find out I'm drinking. And so I ran around and shut all the blinds. I've never done that before. And I hid that bottle in about 10 different places in my apartment for 3 days. I'd move it here, and that's not good enough. You know, somebody might find that. Let's move it here. And like, nobody knows me. Nobody's going to come check on me. On day 3, a little voice in my head said, Rhonda, what are you doing? You know, you're going to go right back where you came from. You've done been told you're going to get charged as a habitual your next go around. I was in my mid-40s, and I'm thinking I'm too old to be doing 8 to 10 years now. So I told myself I was going to get a scooter. My license were originally permanently removed. I was supposed to never get a driver's license. So I got me a little scooter, and I told myself, if you can ride that scooter for 1 year and not drink, you deserve to go try to get your license again. And so I did. And I went, had that blow machine. I had to go to an assessment. And I went and had that assessment done, and the guy knew where I'd been in treatment at, and so he waived the assessment fee, and somehow, by God's grace, I was able to get my license back after they were permanently revoked. And I did have that blow machine on my car, and that was in 2009. Anyway, I got back on track, got a sponsor. She didn't have a body. She had a name, and only gave her first name because, God forbid, anybody said, who's your sponsor? And I gave them a name, and they knew her. So if I couldn't remember the last name, then that was good. And so the first 4 years, a year later, I was able to carry the message back into the Mary Frances Center. My motives were completely wrong. I was going back into the Mary Frances Center to prove to them that I was still sober and doing good, because they don't know I've taken that drink, remember? And I would tell my story from the podium, and I would say my sobriety date is April 17th, 2007. I go on this retreat every year up at Medoc Mountain. And in 2012, I went on that retreat. And Kathy Kane, she's gone now. She was my mate, my tent mate, and I don't know what happened. Well, yes, I do. God straightened a lot of mess out. I just blurted out. I took a drink after I got out of prison. And although she wouldn't have told on me, it was time to do my 5th step. So Amy was my sponsor at this time, and I told her, I said I drank 4 days after getting out of prison, and so she scoops in somebody with a lot more knowledge into the picture, Miss Susie D, that many of y'all probably know. And the question was, what were your intentions when you took that drink? And I said, my intentions were to drink the whole doggone bottle. And she's like, yeah, we're going to take a year away from you. That was the hardest thing to do, was to hand my 5-year chip back and get a 4-year chip. But the next hardest thing was to get in front of all them people at Medoc Mountain and make amends. And then Amy says, you are going to make amends to every group you have ever spoke at. And I did that a long time here, but if you missed it, I'm doing it again. Sorry. But I did. I have made amends. Since that point, my life has just skyrocketed, is the best way I can put it. I had a lot of anxiety issues, and I guess it was probably 2013. I was stuck at a railroad crossing up there in Little Mexico in Rocky Mount, if y'all are familiar with that area. Me and that train engineer had a date every night, apparently. He'd pull his train there and sit, and I couldn't move, and I would get boxed in, and I would just about feel like I was going to die, kind of like I did when I first got up here. And I was sitting there in the car, and I thought, God, I cannot do this. Help me. Just help me. And I'm watching the car trains go by, or the cars of the train go by. And here comes a car, spray painted in gigantic letters, I am. And at that moment, I get goosebumps now to this day thinking about that moment that God was telling me, I am with you. I am with you. You'll be okay. And a peace just flooded over me, and I've never had a problem. And I thought, okay, it's time for me to devote a little bit more time to you. Fast forward over the last 14, 15 years, I bought a house within 2 years of getting released from prison on my own. I own a vehicle. My mom passed away in 2019. Me and her reconnected in 2014. God had worked on her. God had obviously worked on me. And we were able to come together and start working on a relationship. And in February of 2019, she got diagnosed with cancer, and we were burying her 3 weeks later. But I was able to be there with her. I was able to be by her side when she drew her last breath. And I was able to help clean up that dreaded job of going through your mother's stuff. My children, my oldest son, were like this. Now, he went to Al-Anon for a while, so he loves Pat just as much as I do. And I went to Al-Anon for a while, and that's hard. That's hard going where your kids are going. And I had to get his permission first to be able to attend that meeting. But it's hard to hear your children talk about what you've done to them. And there's not a thing you can do but just sit there and listen. It really makes it hard. But life is good today. My dad welcomes me into his life. My dad asked me to help him with his will, which is another subject, you know. You get to be my age, parents start asking you for your input, and that's a topic none of us want to discuss. He wants me to come home. He wants me to visit. I go home every 2 months and just hang out with my dad for 4 or 5 days. He has a list this long of stuff he wants me to do that I'm gladly will do for him, because there were many, many years that I was not available for him. I have 6 beautiful grandchildren ranging from the age of 16 to 2. In 2014, I told God if I was going to have a partner in life, he just needed to drop them out of thin air. Well, what God did was drop them right up out of Facebook, and that's how I met Mr. Bill. And Bill is in a close running for the longest relationship I've been in. And if he can survive until November, he will have won the prize. He will have exceeded 9 years. So anyway, I love all of you. And Pat, thank you so much for being the angel on earth that you are, because if it was not for you, they'd have a whole different speaker up here tonight. And Sandy, thank you for giving me truths that I did not want to hear when I was in your little group of ladies. And Amy, thank you for sticking with me for probably 10 or 12 years now. And I thank all of y'all. And thank you for not falling out this time. I got through with it. Thank you.